Ethan Cole had learned to live a life of silence. Not the peaceful kind of silence that people search for after a long day. His silence was different. It was heavy, filled with responsibility, exhaustion, and the quiet pressure of being everything for someone else. As a single father, his world had shrunk into a simple routine. Wake up early, prepare breakfast, get Lily ready for school, rush to work, come back home, cook dinner, help with homework, and repeat, day after day. There was no space left for himself, no time to think about what he had lost, and definitely no time to think about love. Because love, for Ethan, was something that belonged to the past, something that had left him when he needed it the most. That evening was no different from the others. The apartment was quiet. A soft yellow lamp lit the small living room, casting long shadows on the walls. Toys were scattered across the floor, a small reminder of the chaos that filled his life during the day. Lily had finally fallen asleep on the couch, her tiny body curled under a blanket, her breathing soft and steady. Ethan stood in the kitchen, staring at the sink filled with dishes. He was tired, not just physically, but deeply, emotionally tired. He rubbed his face and let out a slow breath. "This is enough," he whispered to himself. "This is what matters." But even as he said it, a part of him knew something was missing. Suddenly, knock, knock. The sound echoed through the quiet apartment. Ethan froze. He wasn't expecting anyone. No friends, no family. No one ever came by. For a moment, he considered ignoring it. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe whoever it was would just leave. But then, Mr. Cole, a soft voice called from the other side of the door. "It's your neighbor. Could you open the door?" His brows furrowed. He hesitated for a second, glancing toward Lily to make sure she was still asleep. Then, slowly, he walked toward the door. There was something about that voice. Gentle calm, but with a hint of urgency. He unlocked the door and pulled it open. And that's when he saw her. Standing under the dim hallway light was a woman he had only seen in passing before. Emma, the nurse who lived next door. Her light blue scrubs were slightly wrinkled, as if she had just come back from a long shift. A few strands of her hair had escaped her ponytail, framing her face in a way that made her look both tired and unexpectedly beautiful. But it wasn't just her appearance. It was her eyes. They carried something: warmth, kindness, and a quiet strength. "Oh, hi," Ethan said, a little caught off guard. "Is everything okay?" Emma gave a small, apologetic smile. "I'm really sorry to bother you this late," she said, "but I think this belongs to you." She held out a small object in her hand. Ethan looked down, and his heart skipped. It was Lily's inhaler. A wave of realization hit him instantly. He must have dropped it earlier, or maybe Lily had taken it out while playing. Either way, it wasn't where it was supposed to be, and that thought alone made his chest tighten. "Where did you find this?" he asked quickly. "In the hallway," Emma replied, "right near your door. I noticed it when I got home." Ethan exhaled, relief washing over him. "Thank you. Seriously," he said, his voice softer now. "This is important." Emma nodded gently. "I figured," she said. "I work at the hospital, so I recognize things like this." For a brief moment, silence settled between them. Not awkward, just still. Ethan wasn't used to this. Standing at his door, with someone who wasn't just passing by. He cleared his throat slightly. "I appreciate you bringing it back," he added. Emma crossed her arms lightly, leaning just a little against the wall. "You should probably keep a closer eye on things," she said, her tone soft but slightly teasing, "especially with a child." Ethan blinked. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, a real smile, the kind he hadn't felt in weeks. "Yeah," he admitted. "You're right." Emma's lips curved into a small smile, too. For a second, their eyes met, and something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't obvious. But it was there. A small spark, the kind that quietly settles into a moment without asking permission. Ethan quickly looked away, slightly uncomfortable with how aware he suddenly felt. "Well, thanks again," he said, stepping back slightly. "You probably had a long day." Emma nodded. 12-hour shift, she said. "Nothing unusual." He raised his eyebrows. "That sounds exhausting." She shrugged lightly. "You get used to it." There was something in the way she said that, like she had seen more than she talked about. Like her world wasn't simple either. Ethan hesitated. Then, before he could stop himself, he said, "Do you want some coffee or something?" The words surprised even him. Emma looked at him, equally surprised. At first, she didn't answer. Then, she smiled gently. "Maybe another time," she said. "You should get some rest." Ethan nodded, slightly embarrassed. "Yeah, probably." She turned to leave, but just before walking away, she paused. "And Mr. Cole," he looked up. She gave him a small, knowing look. "You're doing better than you think." His expression changed. The words caught him off guard. No one had said that to him before. Not in a long time. "Good night," she added softly, and then she walked away. Ethan stood there for a moment, watching her disappear down the hallway. Then, slowly, he closed the door. The apartment was quiet again, but something felt different. He looked down at the inhaler in his hand, then over at Lily, still sleeping peacefully. He walked over, gently placing the inhaler back where it belonged. His movements were slower now, thoughtful. His mind replayed the moment. Her voice, her smile, her words. "You're doing better than you think." Ethan sat down on the edge of the couch. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel completely alone. There was someone next door. Now, someone who noticed things. Someone who cared, even if just a little. And somehow, that was enough to change something inside him. He leaned back, letting out a quiet breath. Maybe life wasn't as closed off as he had convinced himself it was. Maybe some doors opened when you least expected them. And sometimes, all it took was a simple knock. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more emotional and viral stories. The next morning felt different. Ethan couldn't explain it. Nothing in his routine had changed. The alarm rang at 6:30 a.m. He got up, made breakfast, packed Lily's school bag, and helped her tie her shoelaces. Everything was the same, and yet, something wasn't. His mind kept drifting back to the night before, to that knock, to her voice. "Emma, Dad, you're burning the toast," Lily said, pulling him out of his thoughts. Ethan blinked, and quickly turned back to the stove. "Right, yeah. Sorry," he muttered, flipping the toast a second too late. Lily giggled. "You're thinking again." He raised an eyebrow. "Thinking isn't a crime. It is when breakfast suffers," she replied confidently. Ethan chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Kids noticed everything, even the things you tried to hide." After dropping Lily off at school, Ethan headed to work, but his focus wasn't where it usually was. Numbers blurred, emails went unread longer than usual, and every now and then, without realizing it, his thoughts wandered back to the hallway, and the woman who had somehow stepped into his life without warning. That evening, when he returned home, the apartment felt quieter than usual. He set his keys down, took off his jacket, and sighed. Another long day. But before he could settle in, there was a knock on the door again. This time, he didn't hesitate. He walked straight to it and opened it. Emma stood there, but this time, she wasn't in her scrubs. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, her hair loosely falling over her shoulders. Without the hospital uniform, she looked softer, more approachable. "Hey," she said, a little unsure. "I hope I'm not bothering you." Ethan shook his head. "No, not at all." She held up a small notebook. "Lily left this near the staircase this morning," she explained. "I think she dropped it on her way out." Ethan took it, recognizing the bright cover instantly. "Of course she did," he sighed lightly. "Thank you again." Emma smiled. "She's adorable, by the way." Ethan's expression softened. "Yeah, she is." There was a pause, a familiar silence, but this time it didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt open, like both of them were waiting to see what the other would say next. Then Ethan remembered something. "Wait here," he said quickly, stepping back inside. Emma tilted her head slightly, but stayed. A few seconds later, he returned, holding a small plate. "Peace offering," he said awkwardly. "She made cookies yesterday and insisted I share." Emma looked at the cookies, then at him. "You're using your daughter as an excuse to be nice," she teased gently. Ethan smirked. "Maybe." She accepted the plate. "Well, I guess I have no choice then." Actually, Ethan added, hesitating for just a second, you could come in. It'd be easier than standing in the hallway. Emma paused, just for a moment. Then she nodded. Okay. As she stepped inside, her eyes quickly scanned the apartment. It was simple, clean, but lived in. Toys neatly pushed into corners. A small bookshelf filled with children's stories. A framed picture of Ethan and Lily sitting on the table. You've made this place feel like a home, she said softly. Ethan shrugged. I try. They moved into the living room. Emma sat on the couch, while Ethan poured 2 cups of coffee. Careful, he said, as he handed her one. It's strong. She took a sip and smiled slightly. You weren't kidding. They both laughed quietly, and just like that, the tension faded. Time seemed to slow down. At first, their conversation was simple. Surface level, safe. How long have you been living here? Emma asked. About 2 years, Ethan replied. What about you? Almost a year, she said. Work transferred me here. He nodded. How is it? The job. I mean, Emma leaned back slightly, thinking, it's intense, she admitted. Some days are really hard. You see people at their worst, but sometimes you help them get better, and that makes it worth it. Ethan listened carefully. There was something about the way she spoke. Honest, real, no exaggeration. No one ever talks about how hard that must be, he said. Emma gave a small smile. Most people don't ask. Their eyes met again, and this time, neither looked away immediately. The conversation slowly deepened. Emma shared stories about long nights at the hospital, about patients who didn't make it, and the ones who did. Ethan didn't interrupt. He just listened. Really listened. And for Emma, that meant more than he realized. What about you? She asked, eventually. What's your story? Ethan hesitated. That question wasn't easy, but something about her made it feel safe. I used to think my life was planned out, he said slowly. Career, family, everything. Emma stayed quiet, letting him continue. But things don't always go the way you expect, he added. There was a weight behind his words. Emma didn't push. She didn't ask for details. And somehow, that made it easier. I've just been focusing on Lily since then, he said. She's my priority. Emma nodded gently. And you're doing a good job. He let out a soft breath. You said that yesterday. Because it's true, she replied. Silence followed. But this silence felt different from the ones in his past. It wasn't empty. It was full, comfortable, like neither of them needed to fill it with unnecessary words. Outside, the night grew deeper. Inside, the space between them grew smaller, without either of them realizing it. Ethan glanced at the clock. I didn't realize it was this late, he said. Emma looked to him. Should probably go. But neither of them moved right away. There was a hesitation, a quiet reluctance. Like leaving would break something that had just started forming. Finally, Emma stood up. Thank you for the coffee, she said. Ethan stood as well. Anytime. He walked her to the door. As she reached for the handle, she paused, then turned back slightly. I'm glad I knocked last night, she said. Ethan smiled faintly. Me too. Their eyes met again, and for a moment, it felt like something more could be said. But it wasn't. Not yet. Good night, Ethan, she said softly. Good night, Emma. She stepped out into the hallway, and just like that, she was gone. Ethan closed the door slowly, but this time, the apartment didn't feel as quiet as before. He walked back into the living room, sitting down on the couch where she had been moments ago. Her presence still lingered in the air, in his thoughts, in the way his chest felt lighter than usual. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, and, for the first time in a long time, he wasn't just surviving the day, he was feeling it, living it, and maybe looking forward to what came next. Because something had changed. Not all at once, not dramatically, but quietly, naturally, and sometimes. Those are the changes that matter the most. If you're enjoying this emotional story, don't forget to like the video. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more viral storytelling content. That night began like any other. Calm, predictable, safe. Ethan had just finished cleaning up the kitchen. The dishes were finally done, the counters wiped, and the small apartment was quiet again. Lily sat on the couch, wrapped in her blanket, watching her favorite cartoon with sleepy eyes. "All right, bedtime," Ethan said gently, walking over. "5 more minutes," Lily mumbled, barely keeping her eyes open. Ethan smiled. "You said that 10 minutes ago." She groaned softly, but didn't argue as he lifted her into his arms. Moments later, he tucked her into bed, adjusting the blanket carefully around her. "Good night, sweetheart." "Good night, Dad," she whispered. Ethan turned off the light and quietly stepped out, closing the door behind him. Everything felt normal, peaceful, but sometimes it's the quiet nights that change everything. Hours passed. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Ethan sat in the living room, scrolling through his phone, but his mind wasn't focused. It drifted back to Emma. Her voice, her smile, the way she listened, the way she made things feel lighter. He exhaled slowly, shaking his head as if trying to clear his thoughts. "This is nothing," he muttered to himself. "Just a neighbor." But even as he said it, he didn't fully believe it. Suddenly, a faint sound broke the silence. A cough. Ethan's head snapped toward Lily's room. Another cough, this time louder, strained. He stood up immediately and rushed toward her door. "Lily," he called softly, pushing it open. She was sitting up in bed, her small body shaking slightly as she coughed again. Hey, it's okay," Ethan said quickly, walking over, but something felt wrong. Her breathing wasn't normal. It was uneven, shallow, panicked. "Where's your inhaler?" he asked, trying to stay calm. Lily pointed weakly toward the bedside table. Ethan grabbed it and helped her take a puff. "Slow breaths. Okay, just like we practiced." But her breathing didn't improve. If anything, it got worse. Fear crept in, fast, sharp, unforgiving. Come on," he whispered, trying again. Another puff. Nothing. Lily's small hands gripped his shirt. "Dad, I can't breathe." Those words hit him like a punch to the chest. Everything inside him froze for a second. Then panic took over. His mind raced. Hospital, call, emergency. But it felt too slow, too far, too late. And then, a thought. Emma. Without wasting another second, Ethan scooped Lily into his arms and rushed out of the apartment, barefoot, heart pounding. He reached Emma's door and knocked hard. "Emma, please open the door." His voice cracked, desperate. Again, "Emma." The door swung open almost instantly. Emma stood there, eyes wide but focused. "One, look at Lily." And she understood everything. "What happened?" she asked quickly, already stepping aside. "She can't breathe," Ethan said, his voice shaking. "Come in now." Emma moved fast, professional.com, under pressure. A completely different version of the woman Ethan had been talking to just hours ago. "Lay her here," Emma instructed, guiding him to the couch. Ethan carefully placed Lily down. Emma knelt beside her, her expression serious but controlled. "Hey, sweetheart," she said gently. "I'm Emma. Remember me." Lily nodded weakly. "You're going to be okay," Emma assured her. "Just focus on my voice." Ethan stood nearby, frozen, watching, helpless. Emma quickly checked Lily's breathing, her pulse, her reactions. "Her airway is tight," Emma said under her breath. She moved quickly to grab a small medical kit from a nearby cabinet. Ethan's eyes widened. "You have all this at home?" "I'm a nurse," she replied calmly. "We prepare." She handed Ethan a small mask. "Hold this near her face." Gently, his hands trembled as he followed her instructions. "Am I doing it right?" he asked, his voice barely steady. "You're doing fine," she said firmly. "Stay with me." Minutes felt like hours. Lily's breathing was still uneven. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, every second stretching longer than the last. "Come on, Lily," he whispered. You're okay." Emma stayed focused, adjusting her approach, watching closely. Then, slowly, very slowly, Lily's breathing began to stabilize. Her chest movements softened. The tension eased. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. "She's responding," Emma said quietly. Relief flooded the room. Ethan dropped to his knees beside the couch, his head falling forward for a moment. "She's okay?" he asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Emma looked at Lily, then back at him. "She's going to be okay." Those words, they broke something inside him. Not in a bad way, but in a way that released everything he had been holding in. The fear, the pressure, the constant need to stay strong. His eyes filled with emotion. "I didn't know what to do," he admitted, his voice shaking. "I thought I was going to lose her." Emma softened. "You did exactly what you needed to do," she said. "You didn't panic. You came here." "I was panicking," he said, letting out a shaky breath. "Maybe," she replied gently, "but you still acted. That's what matters." Lily stirred slightly, her breathing now calm. Ethan reached out, gently brushing her hair back. "I've got you," he whispered. Emma watched them quietly. There was something about this moment. Raw, real, unfiltered. After a few minutes, Ethan finally looked up at her, and this time, there were no walls, no guarded expressions, just honesty. "I don't know what I would have done without you," he said. Emma met his gaze. "You won't have to find out." Silence filled the room again, but this silence was different from before. It wasn't just comfort, it was connection, deep, unspoken. Ethan stood slowly, still processing everything. "I meant what I said," he added, "about not knowing what I'd do without you." Emma didn't respond immediately, but her expression softened, and her eyes said more than words could. "You're not alone," she said quietly. Those words hit differently now, because, for the first time, Ethan believed them. Lily shifted again, half asleep. "Dad," she murmured. "I'm here," he said quickly. Emma smiled faintly. "She'll need rest," she said. "You can stay here tonight, if you want. It'll be easier to monitor her." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, okay." He sat down beside Lily, exhaustion finally catching up with him. Emma dimmed the lights slightly, creating a calm, safe atmosphere. As the night settled again, everything felt quieter, but not empty. Ethan glanced at Emma. She was sitting nearby, watching over them both, steady, reliable, strong. And in that moment, something shifted inside him. This wasn't just about gratitude anymore. This wasn't just about a neighbor helping in a crisis. This was something deeper, something real, something that had quietly grown, and now couldn't be ignored. Ethan leaned back slightly, his eyes heavy, but his mind awake. Because tonight, everything had changed. And he knew nothing would ever be the same again. If you're loving this emotional journey, don't forget to like the video. Share your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more powerful and viral stories. Morning came slowly. Soft light filtered through the curtains, casting a gentle glow across the room. The world outside was waking up, but inside Emma's apartment, everything felt still, peaceful. Ethan hadn't slept much, not because he couldn't, but because he didn't want to. Every time he closed his eyes, the fear from last night came rushing back. Lily struggling to breathe. His own helplessness, the panic that had nearly taken over him. But then, there was Emma, calm, focused. There he looked over at the couch where Lily was sleeping, her small chest rising and falling steadily now. She was okay. That's all that mattered. Ethan let out a slow breath, running a hand through his hair. "You're still awake." Emma's voice broke the silence. He turned his head. She was standing near the kitchen, holding 2 cups of coffee. Her hair was loosely tied, and without makeup or her uniform, she looked different, softer, real. "Yeah," Ethan admitted quietly. "Didn't really sleep." Emma walked over, handing him a cup. "That's normal," she said. "After a night like that," he nodded, taking a sip. The warmth of the coffee grounded him. "Thank you," he said after a moment. Emma sat down across from him. "You've already said that." "I know," he replied, "but it doesn't feel like enough." Emma watched him for a second. Then she leaned back slightly. "You don't owe me anything, Ethan." He shook his head. "That's not how it feels." There was a pause. Not uncomfortable, just heavy with everything they weren't saying out loud. Ethan glanced at Lily again. "She's all I have," he said softly. "Everything I do, it's for her." Emma nodded. "I can see that." He let out a quiet breath. "But last night, I realized something." Emma didn't interrupt. She just listened. "I can't do everything alone," he continued. "No matter how much I try." His voice carried a vulnerability that hadn't been there before. A crack in the wall he had built around himself for years. Emma's expression softened. "You were never meant to," she said gently. Ethan looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't look away. There was something in her eyes. Understanding, not pity. Not judgment, just quiet support. And somehow, that was exactly what he needed. Lily stirred slightly, letting out a small yawn. Ethan immediately leaned forward. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly. She blinked, looking around. Then, her eyes landed on Emma. "You're here," Lily murmured. Emma smiled warmly. "Of course I am." Lily sat up slowly. "I feel better," she said. Ethan exhaled in relief. "That's good. That's really good." Emma gently checked her again, her movements careful and reassuring. "You're doing great," she told Lily. "But we'll still take it easy today, okay?" Lily nodded. "Can I stay here?" she asked suddenly. Ethan blinked. "Here. With Emma," she said innocently. Emma laughed softly. "Well, that depends on your dad." Ethan looked between them, slightly surprised, but not uncomfortable. "Yeah," he said after a moment. "We can stay for a bit." Lily smiled, clearly happy with that answer. And just like that, the atmosphere shifted. What had been a night of fear slowly turned into something lighter, warmer, more connected. Hours passed. They had breakfast together. Simple, quiet, but meaningful. Lily talked more than usual, her energy slowly returning. Emma listened with genuine interest, laughing at her little stories, asking questions, making her feel important. Ethan watched them, and something inside him changed. This felt like something he hadn't had in a long time. Not just help, not just support, but presence. Real, emotional presence. Later that afternoon, Lily fell asleep again, resting on the couch. Ethan and Emma stepped out onto the small balcony. The city stretched out in front of them, bathed in soft daylight. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence felt natural. "I haven't seen her smile like that in a while," Ethan said finally, nodding toward the inside. Emma leaned against the railing. "She feels safe." Ethan looked at her. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She does." There was a pause. Then Emma spoke. "And you?" He frowned slightly. "What about me? When was the last time you felt safe?" she asked. The question caught him off guard. He didn't answer right away, because the truth was, he didn't remember. "I don't really think about that," he admitted. Emma turned toward him. "Maybe you should." Ethan let out a small, almost humorless laugh. "Not really something I've had time for." Emma studied him for a moment. Then she said something that hit deeper than he expected. "You're allowed to need things, too, you know." He went quiet. Those words. They weren't loud, but they echoed. For years, Ethan had pushed his own needs aside, because being a father came first. Because being strong came first. Because there was no other choice. But standing here with Emma, that belief started to feel incomplete. "Why do you care?" he asked suddenly. Emma blinked. "What about us?" he clarified. "About me. About Lily." His voice wasn't defensive, just curious. Emma hesitated, not because she didn't know the answer, but because saying it out loud made it real. "I don't know exactly when it happened," she said slowly, "but somewhere along the way, you stopped being just my neighbor." Ethan's chest tightened slightly. "And what am I now?" Emma met his eyes, and for a moment, everything else faded. "You're someone I think about," she admitted softly. "More than I probably should." The air shifted completely. Ethan felt it. That moment. That line between what they had been and what they could become. He stepped a little closer. Not rushed. Not forced. Just natural. "Maybe you should," he said quietly. Emma didn't step back. Their distance closed. Slowly. Carefully. Like both of them were aware that this moment mattered. Their hands brushed lightly, a small touch, but it sent a quiet shock through both of them. Neither pulled away, neither spoke, because sometimes words aren't needed. Inside, Lily shifted slightly in her sleep. A reminder, a grounding point. Ethan glanced back briefly, then looked at Emma again. This wasn't just about them. It was bigger than that, more important, and somehow, that made it feel even more real. "I don't want to mess this up," he admitted. Emma's expression softened. "You won't," she said gently. "Not if you're honest." Ethan nodded, slowly. For the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of what he was feeling. He wasn't running from it. He wasn't shutting it down. He was allowing it. And that alone was a huge step. The sun slowly began to set, casting golden light across the balcony. A new kind of warmth settled between them. Not rushed, not overwhelming, but steady, growing real. Because sometimes, the strongest connections don't come from grand gestures. They come from quiet moments, from shared silence, from understanding without needing explanation. Ethan looked at Emma one more time, and this time, there were no walls left. Just openness, just truth, and something that felt very close to hope. If you're enjoying this emotional love story, don't forget to like the video. Comment your favorite moment, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more viral and heart-touching stories. Some changes don't arrive loudly. They don't announce themselves or demand attention. They simply settle in, quietly, naturally, and before you realize it, everything feels different. That's what happened after that night. Ethan didn't wake up the next day with a dramatic realization. There was no sudden confession, no overwhelming moment. Instead, there was calm, a steady, unfamiliar calm that wrapped around his life in a way he hadn't felt in years. And somehow, Emma had become a part of it. It started with small things. Morning coffee together. A simple good morning that turned into a conversation. Lily insisting that Emma join them for breakfast. And Emma not saying no. At first, Ethan thought it might feel strange, letting someone into their routine, into their space, into their lives. But it didn't. It felt right, like a missing piece had quietly found its place. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and gold, the three of them sat together at the small dining table. Lily was talking non-stop, as usual, and then my teacher said, "I draw the best trees in class." Emma smiled. "That's impressive. You'll have to show me sometime." "I will," Lily said excitedly. "But only if you come again tomorrow." Ethan chuckled softly. "She's already making plans for you." Emma glanced at him. "And you don't mind?" Ethan shook his head. "No," he said honestly. "I don't." Their eyes met briefly, and in that simple exchange, there was understanding. Later that night, after dinner, Lily had fallen asleep almost instantly. Ethan adjusted her blanket, brushing a strand of hair from her face. For a moment, he just stood there, watching her, peaceful, safe. Then he stepped out into the living room. Emma was standing near the window, looking out at the quiet street below, the soft glow of streetlights reflected in the glass. Ethan walked over slowly. "She likes you," he said. Emma smiled faintly. "If I like her too." There was a pause. Then, she added, more quietly, "She's special." Ethan nodded. "She is." Silence settled between them, but it wasn't empty. It was full of everything they had shared over the past few days. Everything that had changed. Everything that had grown. "I've been thinking," Ethan said finally. Emma turned slightly toward him. "That's dangerous," she teased gently. He smiled. "Yeah, maybe." Then his expression softened. "But seriously, I've been thinking about us." The teasing faded from her face, replaced by something more serious, more real. She repeated. Ethan took a breath, not out of fear, but because he wanted to say this right. "I've spent a long time keeping things simple," he said. "Focused on Lily. Focused on getting through each day." Emma listened closely. "And that's not going to change," he added. "She always come first." Emma nodded. "I know, but," he continued, his voice quieter now, "that doesn't mean there isn't room for something else." Her heart skipped. She didn't say anything. She just waited. "For you," he finished. The words hung in the air. Simple, but powerful. Emma looked at him. Really looked at him. Not as a neighbor. Not as someone she helped. But as a man who was finally opening his heart. And that wasn't something she took lightly. "Ethan," she began, then paused. Because this wasn't easy. Not for her either. "I didn't plan for this," she admitted. "Neither did I," he replied. She let out a small breath. "But I don't want to be something temporary in your life," she said honestly. "Or Lily's." Ethan stepped a little closer. "You wouldn't be," he said firmly. There was no hesitation in his voice. No doubt. Just truth. Emma searched his eyes, looking for uncertainty, for fear, for anything that might suggest he wasn't ready. But she didn't find it. What she found, instead, was sincerity. "I'm not asking for everything to change overnight," Ethan continued. I just don't want to ignore what this is. Emma's expression softened. Neither do I, she said quietly. Another step. Closer, the distance between them felt smaller than ever. Not just physically, but emotionally. I've spent so much time taking care of others, Emma said. I forgot what it feels like to have someone stand beside me. Ethan's voice was gentle. Then let me be that person. The words weren't dramatic. They weren't exaggerated, but they carried weight. Because they were real, Emma felt it. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't hold back. She stepped closer, close enough to feel his presence, close enough to know this moment mattered. This isn't just about us, she said softly. It's about her too. I know, Ethan replied. And I would never let anything hurt her, she added. Ethan nodded. I trust you. That word, trust, it meant everything. More than love, more than attraction, because trust was what held everything together. Emma smiled faintly, and in that moment, the last of the hesitation faded. Ethan reached for her hand, slowly giving her time to pull away, but she didn't. Her fingers slipped into his, naturally, easily, like they belonged there. A quiet connection, simple but strong. Neither of them rushed. Neither of them needed to, because this wasn't about intensity. It was about stability, about building something that would last. Inside the apartment, everything was quiet. Lily slept peacefully. The world outside moved on as it always did. But inside, something new had begun. Not loud, not overwhelming, but real. Ethan looked at Emma, his voice softer now. I don't know where this will go, he admitted, but I know I don't want to walk away from it. Emma squeezed his hand gently. Then, don't, she said. A small smile formed on his lips, and for the first time in years, it reached his eyes. They stood there for a moment longer, not saying anything, because they didn't need to. Some things are understood without words. Eventually, Emma glanced toward the door. I should go, she said quietly. Ethan nodded, though part of him didn't want the moment to end. He walked her to the door, just like before, but this time, it felt different. More meaningful, more certain. She reached for the handle, then paused, turning back to him. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Emma. There was a brief moment, a quiet pause. Then, instead of stepping away immediately, she stayed, and so did he. No rush, no pressure, just a shared understanding. Because, sometimes, a door doesn't just open to a hallway. Sometimes, it opens to a new beginning. Emma finally stepped out. The door closed gently behind her. Ethan stood there for a moment, his hand still on the handle. Then he turned back, toward the apartment, toward Lily, toward the life he had built, and the new chapter that had just begun. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't just moving forward, he was moving forward with someone. And that changed everything. If you enjoyed this emotional love story, don't forget to like the video, comment your favorite part, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more viral and heart-touching stories.